all, welcome to another video of Corpnce. I'm Bruno Savio and in this video we'll be discussing on functions in Python. So let's dive in. So here when I say functions in Python, they are known as reusable block of code. So imagine that you're coding in your Python and there is some lines of code that you want to reuse again and again. That is where functions come in. So here I'll show you how to declare a function. So you can see in my VS Code, I'm gonna say def. So this is how you define a function. You have the syntax def, definition of the function. You give the name of the function. I'll say it's going to be addition of two numbers. So I don't have to keep it very long. I'll say add, and I'm gonna give parameters. Whatever you're passing in these brackets, it's nothing but your parameters a comma b, and then I'm going to say return a plus b. So this is how your function normally works. But if at all I don't call the function, your function is never going to be used. So here I'll say hello. If I run this, you notice that your particular function is being ignored and the line outside the function, which is nothing but print hello, is being executed. The reason is your function only works if you're calling the function. So if I say add and I have to pass in the values for a comma b, so it should be integers. So 2 comma 4 3 or 4. So now I want to know what the output is. So print 3 and 4, and I can see the answer I'm getting is 5. My function is returning a value that is 5. Well and good. So my function is working. And you see, I have used a return statement. Whenever you're using a function, you always have a return statement. Because once the return statement is reached, it is not going to go back to the function unless it's a recursive function. So now, what is a recursive function? Here, this function is a normal function. Most of the functions that you see will be in this kind of format. You will have some of the logic here. So you'll have some particular logic here, like this, like I just randomly typed it, but you'll have some lines of code there, and the final output will be given in the return statement. Here the final output is nothing but addition, so a plus b is more than enough for us. But now let's say you have a recursive function. So when it's a recursive function, you won't have like this. So I'll take an example. So if I say recursive, I see of n, so recursion. So here the function that is calling itself, a function that is able to call itself is known as recursive function. So if at all I say return IC of n minus 1, okay, and I'm saying if n is not equal to 0, return it's actually equal to 0, right? So when double equal to 0, you got a return done. So when our n value, the parameter that you passed in, reaches 0, we are returning done, or else we just keep on going. We are returning recursion of n minus 1. So by default, I can give here a default value too. If at all you are not passing anything, if you just call recursion like this, so you are calling the function just like this without passing any argument here, that means that by default there is some argument over here. So notice that you pass something. So if at all I don't give any default and run it as it is, I'll get an error, the type error. It says recursion, that function is missing one required position argument n. So make sure you have a default value if at all you are not giving it. So it keeps going, and I can print n here, so it makes sense. Okay, so if I run this, see how your function is calling itself. It goes to the first line. If n is equal to 0, it checks. It's not equal to 0, so it doesn't return done. It goes to print n, which is 10 initially, then return recursion of n minus 1. So we are getting 9. 9 is passed here. Same format, print n, n will be 9, again comes back, n will be 8, pass it to the function again. So you're calling the function here. You can see recursion of n minus 1. So you're just calling it and it's accessing. It's keep on repeating that cycle until n reaches 0. So when n reaches 0, it is returning done. So here this return statement at in the if condition doesn't have a recursive function because you're returning done. You're not calling the function again there. That's the reason why your function stops. But here in this one, your recursion is going on. If at all your if condition is not working, this return function will keep the recursion like call going on. And make sure you initiate the call. So if at all you're not calling here and run this, nothing works. So you have to initiate the call for a function to run. So make sure you call like this. Also notice that whenever you are creating these functions, these are your custom built functions. You had your inbuilt functions also while you are using Python. You have used it a lot of times unknowingly. So where you are saying, let's say you have a list of range 200 or something, okay, and here this one, let's say length of a. Do you see a similarity when you're calling a function? You used length with the parenthesis and you passed in an argument a. You're trying to find the length of this particular list a. Same way here you called a function without any argument inside it. This is exactly how functions are inbuilt in Python, and this is exactly how you create your own custom functions. And most of the functions, let's say take an example of list methods, okay, not exactly functions, they are methods. So here in list methods, let's say you have a list, okay, and in list you see, notice that some functions don't have a return statement. How do I know that? So if I say sort and if I try to try to assign that value into this one b, you notice that b doesn't hold any value, b is empty. But how does that happen? Because sort doesn't return anything. So you see none, it returns none. The reason is it doesn't have any return statement to it. Whatever sorting needs to be done will be done in the original list. Same way here the return statement is the one that is giving us the output. But let's say you don't have a return statement for a function, that still works. So you can have a function def random function random, and I'll say I don't even need to give a parameter. I'll say print this is a random function, and this is totally fine because you call the function and it works pretty fine. You don't need a return statement permanently. It's not like mandatory, it's very optional. And I told you that your function can have recursion and your functions can have nested functions too. So here what do I mean by nested function? So let's say you have a function here, let's say this is a outer function, and inside this outer function I'll have return some value, let's say n, okay, and then I'll say n plus 1, okay, return n plus 1, and inside this outer function I have inner function n, okay, return this inner function should call the outer function, right, outer function, and I'll say n plus 1, or let's keep it n itself because here initially we are doing n plus 1, so it's totally fine, and this actually should call the inner function. So how do I do that? So what I have to do, inner inner function of n plus 1, okay. This syntax might look confusing, but I'll explain in a moment what I'm doing. So I'm saying if n equals 10, return done, or else it keeps on going, okay. And n by default let's keep it 0. Now here, what's exactly happening? You have your outer function, okay? I'll just keep some spaces so it must be clear for you. So outer function has one parameter, and one parameter by default it is 0, n is 0, and there is a return statement, and inside that outer function you have an inner function, okay? Don't focus on the inner function, keep it ignore it. See the return statement, return inner function n plus 1. So when you pass n is 0, 0 plus 1, so inner function is getting 1 as the value. It goes here, and here is in the inner function it is checking if n equal 10, only then return done. So n is not equal to 10, I am comparing here, n is equal to 1 initially. So it goes to this return statement, return outer function of n. So now this 1 is returned here. By default it is not 0 now, it's 1. Again it returns to the inner function, which will go with 1 plus 1. Now you have 2. It will compare, this return won't be done, this return will be done, outer function will get 2. It goes here, again it goes here, it calls this inner function, and this cycle repeats. It goes here, comes here, goes here, and this keeps on repeating until n reaches 10. And when n reaches 10, only then you are returning done, which will jump out of the function. So yeah, this is how your function works. So let me show you how it works. So I can give a more clarity. I can say print, this is executed at the outer function. Then I'm saying print n. Then I can say print no function executed. So you see, I think this n can also be here, no issues in that. What happened? I just run the code, but I didn't call the function. So which function should I call? Pause the video and check it out once, and you know exactly which one to call. We have to call the outer function. So we have to initiate the outer function, which will call the inner function, and the loops keeps on going. So I'm gonna say outer function. I don't have to pass any parameters because n is already 0, and I'll run this. See how it worked. First this line executed, then inner function executed 1. I told you n will be 1. It ignored this one because n is initially 1. Then n goes 2. So this is exactly how it's working. You can see when this inner function executed 9. So here executed 9, okay, and then it went to the outer function. It passed in 9. So inner function is getting 9 plus 1, which is 10. Notice that n is 10, so it compared 10 and it returned done, and it didn't go to the next line, which was inner function executed, n would be 10, but it didn't go to the next line because the previous line was return done. So this is how nested functions work. So that's all for this video. I hope you found this helpful. If it did, do subscribe and stay tuned for the next ones. Thank you.